So now we're going to get into the statements of knowledge that exceed the knowledge of that day. And some of these are just incredible to think about. The first is the roundness of the earth. Isaiah 40:22 says, God is enthroned above the circle of the earth. That word circle there in Hebrew is actually the word kug, which literally means roundness. Keep in mind that this was in 700 BC that this was written. We'll look at 300 BC. There was an Egyptian astronomer, Aristophanes. This guy was the, craziest geometry professor ever. This guy, in 300 BC, decided, hey, I'm going to find the circumference of the earth. But before he knew that the earth was round, to find that circumference, he had to measure out a pace between two cities, miles and miles and miles apart. And he was checking to see if the shadow changed from the sun going over the top. So the shadow, he said, wow, there's no shadow on this stick, but in another town there is a shadow, so maybe the earth is round. So from that, he said, well, let's measure that out. And he was pretty close to finding the circumference of the earth in 300 BC. But as we all know, even when Columbus was sailing, they still thought the earth was flat. There was many, many people who said, well, the earth is flat. There's no possible other explanation. I mean, it feels flat when I'm walking on it, so it must be flat. Even though the Aristophanes had come up with his calculations in 400 BC, or 300 BC, sorry. But we still have to look back that the Bible was written in 700 BC, which is still 400 years prior to that statement. We look at another photograph on here. This is in 1948. Pictures captured by a rocket that was fired. The rocket was attached with cameras that took pictures of the Earth. And you'll see small segments of that showing that the Earth does have a roundness to it. And that was the first photograph of the roundness. Next picture, the first television picture from space was from a satellite. This was in April 1st, 1960. You can definitely see the curvature of the Earth there, showing that it's round. And next is the famous blue marble taken December 7th, 1972 by astronauts, which shows the full Earth as a round object. So then we go back to Isaiah, written in 700 BC, and still it took people years and years to understand that the Earth was round. But the Bible, 700 BC, states that fact. It's just crazy. The next thing that we're going to look at, the first law of thermodynamics. I'm not sure if many are familiar with this, the conservation of energy. But Genesis 2, verses 1 through 2. So the heavens and the earth and everything in them were completed. By the seventh day, God completed his work that he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 2. That is in 1400 BC. This is making a statement that the creation of earth is completed. There is nothing more being created. So then we look at a guy named Julius Robert Mayer. He came up with the law of conservation of energy, which states energy can be neither created nor destroyed. That was in 1842. But 1842 and 1400 BC is a pretty large difference if you're considering what the Bible has to say about time. Genesis in 1400 BC, God's creation is complete. Nothing is being created today that hasn't already been created. This is talking about energy. You cannot transfer energy, or you can transfer energy, but you cannot create energy. It is impossible because God has already done that, and it is complete. The next question: how many stars are there? Jeremiah 33:22. The host of heaven cannot be counted. The sand of the sea cannot be measured. This was written in 600 BC. We look at a guy named Ptolemy. He was an astronomer from Egypt. AD 200, he guessed that there was 1,500 1,055 stars on Earth. He said that's the total amount of stars there are. That's it. The next two people, Tycho Brahe and the great Kepler. This is in 1600s. The guy on the left there, Tycho Brahe, estimated 777 stars. The great Kepler, 1,005 stars. Each of these guys were making out maps of what they could see with their eyes, of how many stars there were, this type of deal. Then we look at the 17th century, the invention of the telescope. This changed everything completely, because people were saying, well, there's a lot more than 1,000 stars out there, but how many stars are there really? So today, scientists agree that there are over 100 billions of stars, and that it's humanly impossible to count them all. So again, Jeremiah 600 BC says, hey, the stars are not able to be counted. God created it, even as an afterthought. It says in Genesis, Genesis 2, 1 through 3, after God created all these things, he said, well, how about I just throw some stars in there as an afterthought, just because I want to show how awesome I am. I'm going to throw in hundreds of billions of stars, just so they can say, wow, look at those stars. It's just, that God would do that for us is just incredible. The next question, how is the earth held in place? Job 26:7 states, he stretches the northern skies over the empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. This was written around 950 BC, and there are a lot of guesses or theories of how the earth was held in place at this time. This next picture is actually one of the theories was that the earth was flat, and that it was riding on the back of elephants, who was on the back of a turtle swimming through the cosmic sea. This was actually a theory that people had thought. There are many others, such as the Greek goddess, or the Greek god Atlas had carried the flat earth on his back, was touching his Atlas vertebrae, which is the very top vertebrae. There are just many ideas of how the earth is held in place. But again, we look back at Job in 950 BC, which tells us that the earth is held by nothing. God has just put it out there and is not held by anything. The next statement, the water cycle. This is interesting because Job and Ecclesiastes both talk about this, and there are some other places as well. Job 36:27 through 28 says, for he makes water drops evaporate. They distill the rain into its mist, which the clouds pour out and shower abundantly on mankind. That was in 950 BC. Ecclesiastes 1:6 through 7 says, gusting to the south, turning to the north, turning goes the wind, and the wind returns in its cycles. All the streams flow to the sea, yet the sea is never full. So then we look into the 17th century, where Perrault, Marriott, and Howell started researching what this water cycle might be. They say, well, this rain comes and it evaporates. How come the sea isn't filling up with rain every time it rains? Where does it go? They're just researching this. How does this really work? And then, of course, today we learn in school of the water cycle, which is almost directly described in Job, which says that rain falls, runs to other areas, evaporates, and it's just a water cycle as we learned in grade school. But again, Job in 950 BC states what the water cycle is and who controls the water cycle. It is God.